Hi guys, Greg O'Rourke here from FretDojo. I wanted to ask you today, are you feeling frustrated when you practice jazz guitar? You feel like you're not getting anywhere? You feel like you're banging your head against a brick wall, not making progress? Well, if you answered yes to any of these questions, then I think today's video is just up your alley. Let's get into it right after this. Oh man, I've been in the studio a bit too much lately. A bit out of fitness. Thought I'd clear my head and go for a walk. All right, come check this out. There we go. That's clearing out the cobwebs. Just what I needed. So most people find jazz guitar pretty frustrating. It feels like it's a very vast kind of topic. There's so much to get into. There's so many different tunes to learn, transcriptions to study, licks to practice. But I think the problem is sometimes people get a bit wrapped up in, trying to do everything too perfectly. Because here's the ironic thing. When you're stressed, it actually releases a chemical in your brain that impedes creativity. You actually can't be creative if you're stressed. And so if your guitar practice is causing you stress, especially for jazz, which is a creative art form, you're not going to be able to be creative in that situation. Just taking a moment to chill out, step back, can completely change your understanding of your practice. And ironically, this is often the time when the big breakthroughs happen after you've done a whole bunch of work and then sit back and just let things rest for a while. Sometimes the answers come to you quite easily. How's that look? So the funny thing about learning jazz is that it seems to be wrapped in a very kind of intense sort of feeling. You've got the whole university side of things where jazz became very institutionalized and kind of intense in that way. There's so many concepts to learn, so many sort of rigid rules that you need to follow. It goes into explicit detail about note choices, scale choices, all this sort of stuff. I want people to start to bring in that more exploratory vibe back into their practice. Not necessarily thinking, oh, what scale am I playing here? And, am I doing a correct Lydian dominant approach here? Or have I got my Mixolydian flat 5 sharp 23 scale under my fingers yet? That stuff comes with experience, but if you're playing like that in your practice room as the primary focus, I think you're missing the point. So think about how a child learns language, right? A child doesn't sit there and think about the grammar that they're necessarily making when they're trying to string sentences together. They're mainly imitating and experimenting. And the problem is that these two things are missing so often when people are practicing jazz. They're thinking too much about grammar, which is kind of useful, but the problem is if you haven't started from a point of imitation and experimentation and not being afraid to make mistakes, then you'll never have the confidence to improvise, because improvisation is basically speaking, rather than just thinking about speaking or thinking what makes up speaking. You actually have to speak the music, and that comes from just sitting down with your guitar, experimenting and enjoying yourself and exploring. So treat your practice kind of like a laboratory. You're a scientist in a laboratory, you're experimenting with different sounds, different flavors, and just seeing what works and what doesn't, and withholding the self-judgment. Because kids don't care if they're making the wrong sound. If they say the wrong word in a sentence, the parents correct them, but they don't mind. They just go, oh, okay. But they don't beat themselves up about it. And that is the biggest difference between kids that learn things and adults that learn things. Adults get too wrapped up in what's right and wrong because we already know what sounds good. It's a curse, We listen to Joe Pass playing these amazing solos on those recordings, those virtuoso recordings and things like that he did in the 70s, and then you try to play something that's like, oh, I could never sound like that. And you could sound like that, it's just that your reference point is too distorted. You feel like you have to get there right away. And Joe Pass probably sat there for many, many years experimenting, imitating greats like Charlie Parker and others, and just getting on the guitar and seeing what works and figuring out a system. So that's what the main thing that I wanted to talk about today, was how important it is to bring in that exploratory side of things into your jazz guitar practice. It makes a lot of difference. And when I dropped all the needing to be correct kind of approach when I was practicing, ironically, that's when you start being more correct, because you start to learn more intuitively where the good notes lie. Okay guys, well, that wraps it up for today's lesson. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you're interested in finding out more ways to boost your jazz guitar playing skills, make sure that you check out my website, FretDojo.com. The URL is on your screen right now, and you'll be able to get a whole bunch of resources there, and we've got some great courses and programs on offer there as well if you wanted to check those out. And make sure that you check out my future videos on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button on this page to be notified when my next videos come out. Okay, well, that's all from me. I'm Greg O'Rourke, and I look forward to seeing you in the next Fret Dojo episode. Bye for now.